Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to take 20 minutes to explain Armis's value in the world of cybersecurity. And so we're going to talk about how organizations need a solution for good risk management during these times of digital transformation. I want to spend one slide on talking about what Armis is. For those of you that don't know, Armis is an agentless device security platform. Our goal is to discover every device in the environment, whether it is a legacy IT device, an OT device, an IoT device, whether there is strong patch management or update abilities for the device, for the platform, or whether it is a unmanageable, unagentable device. Once we've done this, we do this in real time. It's continuous. It complies with all of the NIST legislator about having mature cyber security operations. We are able to tap network environments in a passive manner. So it is at zero risk to any critical devices. We are very often used in healthcare and critical manufacturing systems. So we don't induce any risk by sending any traffic to critical systems. And it's an extremely frictionless approach. So we can deploy literally in a matter of hours and cover the vast majority of the estate. When we've given someone a complete picture of their actual environment, they are then able to mature and make better informed decisions about how they wish to manage their estate. So this is the secondary phase of analysis. We can tell people exactly what the device situation is in terms of its network behaviors, in terms of its firmware levels, in terms of the risks and vulnerabilities that it is suffering or liable to. And then we can take actions, whether they be autonomous or automated, or whether they're part of a integrated SOC workflow process. The reason Armis exists is because of this stat, this chart. You know, I would imagine I've been on a few of these webinars now here, and they're all extremely valuable content that's being presented. But the majority of them are related to the green traditional IT environment. You know, okay, you've got an OS, you've got to apply something on it. You've got to apply an agent in order to have a level of security. But this is quickly diminishing and dwindling as the majority of our technology estate. Gartner have said 25+ billion devices by the end of next year. Forrester have come out and said 40-something billion devices by 2025. And you can see, you know, our technology estate is growing every second, between the cloud adoption to different connected devices, providing new digitally transformed services. It's a very, very difficult thing to apply robust risk governance to that type of attack surface. We all know how to do this with IT. We've all got our, you know, ISO 27000 or NIST or whatever the framework is that you want to apply information security. And we all know that these risks, you know, appear in either an attack to confidentiality or integrity or availability. And we all know how we're going to state and measure what is an appropriate level of security to those three sort of fundamental pillars of risk. We also know that those three pillars of risk manifest in a very broad spectrum of threats. We're all very focused on cyber attacks, right? An exploit coming off a website, a document, an email, and you know, getting onto a Windows laptop, which then moves in the Windows environment, and then a data breach occurs. But that is very much only one very small piece of the picture. Often now, organizations face risks and encounter losses from cyber incidents through a very wide spectrum of threats. Shadow IT is one of those things. Should those devices be in that environment? Has this business unit set up a service but hasn't considered security, right, as an inherent part of the process? Configuration errors we see a lot. Are there holes in the firewall, right? Are there default accounts on systems? As we go around this chart, we are being scanned from malicious actors for thousands of different vulnerabilities incessantly, at every second of the day. We have to accept that sometimes our best practices are not as good as we'd like them to be. We have legacy systems, we have legacy protocols, and we have to work with them. So we need to understand where our vulnerabilities are in terms of state-of-the-art practices. And I won't go through everyone, but of course, privacy is again another threat that manifests itself in different ways from different situations in many different aspects of service delivery. So when we look at our attack surface being split between the green, the yellow, and the red types of connected devices, and we look at where all our investment is in terms of risk management, we can see that we have a massive blind spot, right? So we are very invested in our legacy IT environment, but for the very same risk, the lack of confidentiality, integrity, or availability, we are completely vulnerable to if it falls outside of that arena. And so Armis seeks to address this disparity. This type of disparity is not new, right? So risk governance that is limited in scope has even existed in the IT realm, right? Equifax were rated a CCC, which is poor, by Morgan Stanley Capital Investments, because their data privacy security policies were limited in scope and not applied to all the various risk assessments and risk scenarios that Equifax was subject to. And the inevitable thing happened. They were compromised through a risk scenario that was outside of their existing privacies and policies. And so Armis in Europe is working with the World Economic Forum's approach to advancing cyber resilience. That is really the goal now for any organization, is to be resilient to this ever-changing, cyber threat. The World Economic Forum placed 5 key questions that organizations should ask themselves and look at how they can improve to advance their level of cyber resilience. The first question: how would your organization effectively incentivize risk-based improvement in cyber resilience practices instead of a compliance-based approach, and develop outcomes that enable organizations to move up the cyber maturity ladder? Well, of course, applying risk across your entire estate, across every device that you own, is one way to incentivize risk-based improvement, because now you're seeing the full picture. How do you measure expected likelihood and impact? Well, are you doing things in a continuous manner, right? How often do you get a visibility into the types of encounters and activities? How do you know if your organization is getting a positive return, right? How do you know when your estate, when something new pops up on a particular network, or when do you actually get to see the type of security that you've applied to that? Is there a lag? Is there a gap between your estate and the level of security that you apply to it? And I won't go through the 5 questions, but Armis exists to help you answer these 5. Right? We will engage with you and give you a before and after view of your level of cyber resilience. And that will allow you to measure the delta and allow you to predict exactly the gain in the level of security that you have achieved. So when we talk about connected device risk, we think about, what's at stake, what type of examples, how are any kind of connected device causing harm, causing risk in the real world, in public. And we can see here that this is from an aviation example, but there are many different types of assets and devices that form a aviation system, from maintenance drones, baggage handling robots, various booking systems, catering equipment, smart thermometers, or smart ovens, or whatever they might be. But everything now is essentially dependent on the level of security from its other connected associations. So if we look at how devices have been used as cyber levers in various aspects, we look at how flight information display systems were used in a geopolitical sense. And so this is a dispute between Vietnam and China about the ownership rights to the South China Sea's islands. And so a pro-Chinese group looked at the Chinese investment that the two main Vietnamese airports had made and decided to exploit a backdoor in these systems to take out all of the flight information data and caused a huge outage to the Vietnamese air traffic. This led Vietnam to change their policy and to look at where they would use particular manufacturers of devices in critical systems going forward. When we think about all of these IoT devices that popped up in all areas and all aspects of our business, there's no end to the type of smart thing that now exists. With regards to manufacturers of Chinese product, you very much need to check the user license agreement to see whether the product you've got is actually operating in guidance with Chinese Communist Party policy. And part of this EULA is very much behind the discussion about whether some makers or some manufacturers should be used in sensitive parts of government networks. In terms of devices that are now being used in industrial espionage, the classic example of targeted spear phishing, compromising a device, and exfiltrating the mail spools is known across many, many different types of APT attack. Now we're seeing devices being used as sort of it's the same game, but it's the next level. And so we see here Draytech routers that instead of having to compromise the target, they just compromise the device in the middle, and then we're able to exfiltrate all of the email data between all of the target victims, the entire organization, and their third-party supply chain and conversations. OT devices increasingly being targeted because they are the business. They are critical to the business. In this example, we can see two things. We can see WannaCry that took out the operating system, the SCADA system of a rail network. And the second one is where onboard satellite communications were hacked for actually planes that were in the air from the ground because of default credentials that were used in those systems. If we think about our airspace, right? If we think about what devices are just in our offices and our homes and in our various buildings, and how do they connect? Ericsson have produced a report which they estimate that of the 22 billion IoT devices out there currently, 15 billion of them have a radio. And so again, this is unaddressed risk. There are now some government findings and recommendations about how enterprises and corporates should start to really monitor their airspace for the devices that they are present with. And if you want to have a go, just download a little free app onto your phone. This is BLE scanner, Bluetooth Low Energy Scanner. And you can see, you know, around you how many devices it's possible to pair with and connect to and share data with. And so again, this is very much a blind spot for enterprise. Shadow devices are now increasingly being used. This is an example where corrupt employees installed wireless net access points into AT&T's headquarters for the purposes of sending PIN codes for stolen phones. And they were able to basically unlock and sell over, I think, 2 million phones over a five-year period. And this premise of, you know, rogue devices, again, is something which organizations have almost no ability to detect. This example is from the port of Antwerp, where a drug mafia group were loading their product into legitimate containers in South America and then shipping that product into Antwerp. Two of the crime gang's members pretended to be investors into a cyber security organization, and over months made them realize that in fact they were organized crime, and they blackmailed them to actually breach all of the customs functions and the bonded areas of the port of Antwerp. How they did it was they hid radio devices inside what would be normally safe-looking devices. So they hid radios inside power strips. They put USB devices in the environment, and then they would sit on the outside of the bonded area with an antenna and listen to the Wi-Fi traffic, extract the PIN codes from the shipping containers, give the PIN code back to the organized crime gang, who would then enter the PIN code. The crate would then be delivered to their truck, which was waiting for them, and then they would drive away. And so this method of infiltration is very effective, and it's very often not talked about or spoken about. We see these devices growing. So this looks like it's a USB charger. It's not. This extracts Microsoft wireless keyboard strokes out of the air and then sends that to an operator. This looks like an iPhone cable. It's not. Again, it has a radio inbuilt, and it can intercept data between the iPhone and the laptop. This device was created to actually trundle into a building and hide in a corner. And if you visit the Armis website, we have a great video where we take a smartphone, fly it up to the 27th floor of a building, and break into a wireless access point. And so these type of rogue devices are indicators of extremely serious security incidents. There's often a trend where, you know, APT groups really create the method for attack, and it filters down over time into more mainstream criminal groups. And we can see here that basically towards the end of 2019, in terms of inbound threats, targeting IoT devices became the #1 threat, because they are almost impossible to secure if they're listening on a default port with a set of default credentials. And so I thought I wanted to show you some findings from some of our customer engagements and the different things that we've been able to visualize. I'm hoping that I'm conveying that Armis is extremely device-centric in the way that we do things, because it adds immediately another level of context to the analyst or to the CISO or to the board member. And so the customer's requirement here was that I want to see all of the manufacturers that I've got. I want to see the ones I know about. I want to see the ones I don't know about. And I want to see the devices that occasionally connect with my infrastructure. And so we are able to export data in standard format. You can import that into any of your preferred business intelligence tools. In another hospital environment, we were able to, again, very quickly apply the enrichment of device data to enable SOC teams to make very quick decisions. If you are at all familiar with, IPS or network traffic analysis systems, you will know that you get a source address and you get a destination address, and then you have to figure out what is the nature of that communication. With Armis, we'll tell you straight up, this is a medical device and it's in Riga and it's running urgent care medical software and it's just connected to livefastcasino.com. Right? That was a significant event for a healthcare organization that was very quickly prioritized in the triage process. The other two examples are one of data privacy concerns, right? So I've got a medical device which is using standard medical protocols, which is normal, but unfortunately, those protocols are unencrypted. And whilst they're in a controlled environment, I'm okay with that. But as soon as they're going to the guest network and I don't know the recipient device, I'm not okay with clear text protocols leaving my control boundaries, right? And so again, an event which would normally take days to resolve was instantly recognizable. And finally, the third one is again another one of configuration errors. I've got a device here which should only really be connected to the corporate network, but it's jumping between guest and corporate. And that could indicate any number of things. But what it does do, it means that it shouldn't be happening, and I don't want this device connecting to the guest network. Another example here in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see that I've highlighted drone, right? So in this particular example, we saw, dash cams, lots of mobile phones, tablets, single board computers. But the thing we've highlighted here is a drone. Now, most people think, well, okay, well, drones are everywhere. I'm not surprised that you saw a drone. It's just that this customer was an airport. And so a sort of side use case came out that we were able to spot drones in their airspace, which was unexpected. It wasn't why they used Armis, but it was a bonus for them. How we've used this data over time is we now have really unprecedented visibility into the broadest spectrum of devices. I think we have profiles on about 11 or 12 million devices. We have 280 million devices that are tracked in real time. And this allows us to level set the risk. We can tell you whether, that IP camera in the boardroom is doing something different today that it hasn't done before compared to itself. We can tell you if that camera is doing something different compared to its peers in the same organization. And we can tell you if it's doing something different than its entire species across all of the customers. And so this machine learned profiling capability works where regardless of whether the device is agentable, manageable, OT, IT, IoT. And so this is really why organizations are turning to Armis now to help manage their risk in this new digitally transformed world. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
Andy,
yes.
Thank you very much for your persuasive and emotional speech.
Thank you.
At the end of the day, it was very cool. Thank you very much.
No problem.
And now I check whether we have question from the audience. I check the chat. Maybe somebody have questions, please write on the chat. We are ready to answer. I don't see any questions.
I'm not surprised.
I agree. I agree with you.
Yeah.
Okay, Andy, thank you very much. Today's speech very beautiful and very interesting presentation.
Thank you very much.
I think that our audience agree with me.